All right, welcome back to Precious Metal Gems, episode 15. We are here. We've got Matt coming on later to discuss collecting forgotten 90s players. Before we get started, we'll go through our usual stuff. And last week we had some audio issues on our end. Sometimes the program we use cuts out, and there's really no way to fix it after the fact other than re recording, which was too late since we had already released it. But in the spirit of thoroughness, Brian is going to take us through his top five baseball and football inserts because he was cut off. I was not. So you should be able to hear mine, but he's going to take us through his baseball and football inserts briefly before we get to our recurring segment. So, Brian, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I'll just rattle through these really quick. Number 5 for baseball was the 1998 SP Authentic Chirography. It's basically an on-card autograph card, really nice. Blue autograph on a kind of a hollow foil photo. Looks like a photo album picture. Really cool if you want to check them out. And take a look at this YouTube video or go on Trading Card Database and take a look at them. Number 4 was the 98 Circa Super Rave Reviews. It's a horizontal die cut insert set. It's kind of like a bronze finish on the card, pretty neat looking. Looks like almost like a metallic card. And then number 3 was 1997 Flair Showcase Diamond Cuts. We talked about that on some other episodes, and Zan mentioned this for one of his top 5 as well. Number 2 was the 99 Topps Chrome Fortune 15, where it's basically a refractor card with a like a fortune teller's ball, player photo on the foreground, and then the background is inside that ball is kind of like a holographic image of the player. Really cool looking design. Really one that's I don't think it's ever been done before, so it's pretty neat. And my favorite was at number 1 was the 98 Finest, the Man Refractor. Really nice set. Even the base cards, the non-refractors, are really cool and unique. They do a lot of retro insert sets now in Finest. You can find some of like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper and that, but the refractors are really special because of all the colors in the background. Then for football, I have at number 5 the 1999 Fleer Tradition Under Pressure set. Really cool die cut set with really unique background. It's just got a lot of color, a lot of shine, nice die cutting. Really difficult card if you were to grade something like this because of the die cutting. Very cheap and affordable, but I think overall it's just one of the coolest looking inserts. Number 4 is the 98 Fleer Brilliance Shining Star Pulsars. So they have the shining stars, and the pulsars are just like an extreme refractor. It's like literally a mirror finish on the background. It shines like no other card, and then the player image is kind of pops out from the background, is in full color. So a really cool set. Number 3 is the 1997 EX 2000 Cut Above. It's that saw blade die cut with the blade pretty much all the way around the card, which makes it different than the basketball set. And the background looks a little bit different as well. So just a really neat set. Has some really good players in that set too. So if you collect a prominent 90s player and explore that set, they're probably in it. At number 2 is the 1999 metal linchpins. Zan had that at 2 as well. So I think it might be my favorite image on an insert card at least of Favre. Looks like he just threw a touchdown pass. So it's just a really cool image. And then it's unique because it has the orange background as opposed to like the purple with basketball. So it's different, and it really makes the player's image pop. Then number 1 is it's tied probably with my all-time favorite insert card. I would put the Playmaker's Theater probably up here, except I use the Playmaker's Theater in basketball just because I like the background a little bit better with that gold or that brownish bronze colored background as opposed to the silverish with the football. But one that's probably like 1A or 1B, however you want to look at it, would be the 1999 Skybox Premium 2000 Men. It's a die cut. It's probably the closest thing that you can get to like the Jambalaya, just put in football. Has really cool player images. Has an Edgerrin James rookie year card in that set. Really cool image of Favre and some other players in it. So um, definitely just unique, and I don't know if it's ever been done again before, anything that's even really close. So just to run through my top 5. Glad I was able to get it in now, and I felt kind of bad that it was cut off because not only was it cut off on the last episode where you couldn't hear me, we had some crazy like background sounds and things like that when we were talking. So hopefully that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, we're in the clear so far. We already recorded the interview with, I did recorded the interview with Matt last night and went without a hitch. So hopefully this whole thing will be smooth. Great insert picks there. I forgot to say last week, if anyone knows where 98 Flair Showcase Perfect 10 is, has one for sale, anything like that, please let me know. Look, it doesn't matter the player, notwithstanding Griffey or A-Rod. All right, let's move into mail day. I've just got one card. Actually, I got two cards. One is a 98 Super Rave Thurman Thomas, which I posted on my story. My friend Dylan, D Alpha Sports Cards, he grades. We grade together. He sends me his stuff. I grade it. He sent me that card. And once it came back from grading, he's got 2 or 3 cards he's funding through Fund Your Cards. So he needed a little bit of a cap room. So I bought that from him and just kind of fits with the current Super Rave kick. And also picked up a Kevin Green, Hall of Famer Kevin Green. Shout out WCW. Got that off eBay. $75. You could see it on there. I thought that was a fantastic price for a Super Rave of a Hall of Famer. So I was delighted to add that. Brian, did you get any new cards in this week? Or are you expecting any at the end of this week?
I'm in that still probably for the rest of the year in that mode of just paying off some bigger cards that I bought, which I'll be happy to share when I do get them. I do pick up like just some smaller, cheaper cards as they pop up, like trying to do the Ryan Braun Gold Refractor run in Bowman Chrome, Topps Chrome and Finest. So I did pick up a 2016 Bowman Chrome Gold Refractor Ryan Braun in a CCG holder, which I was talking to you before the show. Like I've never even seen these before. I mean, they're disgusting looking. It looks like someone like made it in their garage. It's it's a Gem Mint 10, which would convert to like a PSA 7. So, but it doesn't matter because I'm gonna put these in a binder anyway. So it's one of them. I've been looking for this 2016 Bowman Chrome Gold for like 2 years. I don't know why it's so tough to find. I do know why it's so tough to find because it's probably sitting in like a dollar box somewhere in someone's house. But I was happy to get that. I'll crack it out and I'm gonna put it in the binder with the rest of them. So I'm only like maybe I think 5 total Bowman Chrome or 5 total gold refractors out of 50 away from completing that run for him. And then I try to do it for some of my favorite brewers like Fielder, Ben Sheets, Jenkins, Giovanni Gallardo, players like that from like the early 2000s. And I figured like I can never hang on to Favres I buy that I really want that are out of 100 because then when like I have to consolidate something and I'm trying to fund it with like at least part of my collection to get like a bigger card, they end up selling. So I just decided instead of doing it with Favre, I'll just do it with like Freeman and get, every nice insert set or parallel that I can get of Freeman because they're much cheaper. So I will start doing the Flair Showcase Legacy run. I found a 98 Legacy collection. It's got that shimmer background. You can't really see it on here, but it's cool because it's got the shimmer background and then it has like the stadium, Lambeau Field, like green press boxes in the background. And then it's an image from him from the 98 season Super Bowl where they lost to the Broncos. But it's just a really cool looking card. I love that year, the 98 row one legacies. There's a handful of legacies I like. The other ones kind of look the same as everything else. I mean, they all kind of do it unless you look at the blue writing, but I do like that design. And then I got a couple Brewer platinum medallions. One of a 99 platinum medallion, Jenkins, really cool swing, and then a John Jaha So one away from that set. I just need the sliding in the second base or something.
Oh yeah.
I need a Marquise Grissom for that, and I'll have that entire 99 platinum. With the Brewers, I'm doing something different. I have this list of like 250 cards, and I'm putting in a binder of like just key, either full complete parallels from the 90s, like team sets, or like ones that of like key players, like where I've talked about this a number of times before, where I'm leaving out like some of the, the random guys like JM Gold and Antoine Williamson and stuff like that. But most of the sets I'm getting a complete parallel runs of them. And I'm just putting them in a binder. So making progress on that. And as those come up, I'll pick those up because they don't really break the bank. But I'm not buying anything really big for probably, it could be like the rest of the year until I pay off some of the cards I'm already purchased.
That Jenkins' quote actually looks like Bernitz's swing
I know.
in that picture, which is kind of funny. I thought it was like a photo error at first, but I zoomed in. I was like, no, that's him. That's funny.
Yeah.
I like that card a lot. Also,
I
before
did the
you
double take on
slandered,
that too.
yeah, before you slandered their good name, I was hoping we could get CCG as a sponsor for the show, but I don't think I don't think we're gonna have a shot at that anymore. So we'll have to find some other upstart grading company to help us out down the line.
Red Rocket Grading
Red
wants to be a
Rock,
sponsor of the show, probably.
the RRG. Yep,
Yeah.
I know. I can't wait. Well, speaking of Super Raves earlier, talk about card of the week showcase. It's not really one card; it's several that I just kind of had an eye on. They happen to all be Super Raves from this past week or so. So back on Saturday, August 25th, a Pedro Martinez sold for $909 on eBay auction. That was a raw copy. And then this past Monday, a Barry Larkin outsold that Pedro. Of course, the Larkin was graded a PSA 8, also 99, but that sold for $1,027. Just you rarely see Larkin outsell Pedro, but we saw Larkin's Red Crusade not too long ago go for over $5,000, which was actually about the same price as the PSA 10 of Pedro in the Red Crusade set. And then we also had a Marvin Harrison 98 Super Rave that I was watching. I said, oh, this would be a good one to pick up. That ended on Sunday night at $1,600, which really surprised me. One of the guys I use kind of as a comparison to Harrison and his prices is TO. And the TO raw copy a few months ago sold for $775. So that was a bit of a surprise to see Harrison double him up. But again, that Harrison doesn't come up often. And so you just never know when these auctions, Labor Day weekend, people are hanging out. It's not really a huge vacation time just because kids just went back to school. So maybe people are sitting around on Sunday night bidding on these. And then I was actually at a wedding this past weekend in Virginia. And on Saturday, I got to Saturday. I got to a brewery and I got an alert that 1998 Pedro Martinez Super Rave had popped up on eBay, and that's been the number one Pedro on my list, probably the number one card on my list now here for a few months. It's listed at $4,000 with no best offer. Um, I went back and forth for about 3 hours on clicking bin, was doing the math on what I could move, and had the stuff to sell to get it, no problem. Um, and I was like, but Jeter and Bonds also sell for in that range. How committed am I to paying $4,000? And then, of course, while I was waffling, someone bought it. A friend, a Pedro collector, which was good. Made me at least happy to know where it went. But that was a surprising sale to see a buy it now on that one. Would love to find another one if anyone knows where those are. So we see some strong sales on Super Raves here in the past couple weeks. I'm hoping that this set doesn't go nuclear like the 97 Rubies have lately. Any thoughts on these sales or what we might be expecting from this set in the near future?
I always thought that they were kind of like some of them would just sell high even not even this year, but like even um, I guess earlier this year they were selling pretty high. But I was looking at a Favre. I was trying to find it here on eBay. There's a Favre that's been sitting out there. I think it's still
For
on there. Guys
25
got
grand.
yeah, and then he'll send
Yeah.
like an offer to give it away at like 9,000 or something like that, which is still obviously super high. But like I don't know. I mean, I do like those cards. I'm not crazy about them like you are. Like it's something. If I
Right.
could like get a good deal on like the Favre or like the Freeman, if I could get a good deal on them, like I would get them. But it's just I feel like the good deal that I would be looking for would be like way cheaper than what they sell for, and I don't know if I could. I just don't know if I could do it, especially with what I'm trying to do right now, like with the Favre, kind of like you, where I'm just trying to focus on the super rare. I don't know if it's one that I could, put on that list.
Yeah, they're divisive, I think. And some of that stems from the fact that there's not a whole lot of coverage of holofoil. You just got the nameplate, essentially, which with the Gym Masters pattern or in and in the 99 it's even smaller. Like the font is so small you can barely tell that it's a rave or a super rave for baseball. Of course there's no 99 in football. um but yeah, I could see that it's still a set that's sort of to me is in my top five for 90 sets, but to most people it's probably in like the 11 to 15 range. um so I would anticipate these sales are going to continue to be all over the map. I looked at the football set and was like, well, wonder what it would be like to put together the Hall of Famer set. 42 Hall of Famers in that set. So I think I think that's probably out of the question. That's a lot more than most sets have. That was a 250 card set. So it's probably not feasible. But I do think that people are catching on to them a little. There was a Curtis Martin that had been sitting forever on eBay, and someone finally bought it for $500 not too long ago. So some of these ones I've seen that have been sitting are starting to get bought up. But I don't think it's a set that's going to become a 98 PMG or 24 karat just because the following for it is a little more cultish, I guess, if you want to say.
I will get the Freeman most likely if I can find one. I don't think I'm ever going to get the Favre unless I got some crazy deal or maybe down the road a long time from now. But the Freeman I probably will just because I do love the image on that one. I think it looks really cool. Then with the longer name, it looks really nice when you have that long name on the side with the gold fleck on it. It looks really cool. But when you have the shorter names, it's like you don't get as big of a bang for your buck. If that makes sense. And then I would ask you too. So we talk about on here like parallels that they really just change the font on the card and then call it a parallel and number it. That technically is, the same type of thing on here. If it wasn't such a low grade or a low serial number, do you think that plays into it subliminally that it's such a low serial number compared to like let's say a legacy or something like that for you, or does that?
I think that I will say I don't think so. Okay, again, if it's subconscious or unconscious, then I don't know whether it is or not. But I did not like that set originally, and eventually came around to it. And for me, it actually has to do. It's kind of we're really getting into the minutia of collecting here, but the size of the nameplate, right? The effect of the parallel is prominent. It's prominently displayed on that card, and obviously on Flair Showcase Legacy cards, the blue is obvious, but it's I would say it's relatively. It doesn't affect the overall appearance of the card. It doesn't really play into the visual effect of the what's above the font. Um, so I don't know. I mean, that's certainly a good question. I do really love the Gem Master pattern, that 99, 98 basketball rubies pattern that we've talked about with Sal and his rail. And so I do think that there's something to the effect that draws me in. We saw that Robert Brooks sold for $400 not too long ago. So some of these even under it. Terry Steinbach, the Twins catcher, for $395, and that was an auction. That wasn't even one guy just going on and clicking bin. So we have seen some weird uh, sales that kind of depart from what we would expect. But if you're interested in that set, if you collect that set, reach out to me. I'd like to talk about it a little more. Before we get into our main segment, we've got a listener question from Ragnar Cards. This is a holdover from last week, and I promised that we would answer it, so we will. He is a fledgling 90s collector, and he says, I'm curious about your thoughts on the Isaac Bruce Sky Rubies. And this was he's referring to a 99 rubies, I believe, that just sold for over $1,000 on eBay auction this week. It sold for $700 as a best offer on eBay about a month ago, and was $449 on Golden Auction in June. Exact same card each time, I believe. Has the market exploded that much in the last couple months, or are there some shenanigans? Also, well, taking that first part to clarify that $1,000 sale on that Bruce 99 rubies most recently was from that seller in Australia who was selling all those cards that went really high or that were not paid for and relisted. So I would be a little suspicious of that. But I guess this is the question for you to answer, Brian. He says, also, what do you do in general when a card you want at PC explodes out of your price range in a short time? I'm trying to PC nice Bruce cards and would happily pay the June price, but not the most recent price. Should I try to find his cards in other sets before they double, or should I go to my next player in the Sky Ruby set? Not sure if this is a Bruce thing or a set thing.
I love the 99 Skybox Shining Star Rubies, by the way. I'm looking at this card. It's a really cool image, and with that uniform he's wearing and stuff, it's a really cool card. But so I guess with when cards are exploding out of my price range, I feel like that's where we're getting into sometimes with the Favre stuff, and really just like with the 90s in general, but especially Favre with some of these recent sales. It's like I don't want it to. I'm not one of those people where like I want his market to just like crash and his stuff to be like $2, a card or something. It's never going to be, but I'm just saying like I don't want to like do that. It's not like I think people would be lying if they said, "Oh, I just want all the prices of the cards to just be like worthless so I can get them." I mean, in theory, yeah, that would be cool so you could get them, but I mean, realistically, like none of us really want that, because then you look back at the cards that you bought previously and you're like, God, I just wasted all my money. At least that's how I would look at it. But I think it's more of like I almost like I'm at the point where like I'm almost like scared to look on eBay or any of these auction sites to see like a Favre card that I really want to pop up, because I'm in no position right now to buy it, knowing that I just bought a handful of really big cards recently that I'm paying off. I'm trying to be disciplined with it, but I think that's the difference between someone, you kind of know if you're a collector and you're collecting really the stuff that you like, this is the way to tell. Because if you struggle with this question and struggle with trying to like rationalize cards popping up, being out of your price range, and like you actually get upset over the fact that, God, like I really want these cards and they come up, but they're really high right now, and you go back and forth with yourself. Like you were just talking about with the Pedro, like what could I sell to get it? If you go through that type of thought process and you like struggle, then I think you could really like say that's the difference between someone who's really deep into collecting players or teams or whatever that they love, as opposed to someone that's, just trying to get a good price on something and hold it long term and then sell it for more, or whatever, investing or whatever it is. Because I don't think those people will really struggle with that. They just they just pivot and look for the next card that they can buy at a cheaper price. I think recently Iowa Dave had the podcast episode where he was talking about, like, I think the episode name was like Collecting Until It Hurts. And then he referenced Chris Hoge, where he's talked about people being able to buy cards and it's not painful for them. And, like, did it hurt to buy this card? And I think that's like the territory that we're starting to get into for some of these, 90s PC guys, where their prices are getting outrageous. And I guess if I had to answer the question as like like what should you do? For me, I don't want to pivot to like another set because I just know that when I can't afford that card, I'm going to probably sell. If I'm just trying to fill the void of buying something, I'm just going to sell those things to get the card that I really want. So I would either, start saving up for when that card pops up, or I mean, use if you're more impatient like I am, which I'm not saying is a good thing, use one of like the funding services or something to help you out if it's a really rare thing and it pops up. Because again, it might hurt, but in the long run, you're going to look back when the thing's paid off. If you're like me, and you're going to be like, wow, I'm glad I got that because I may never see one again for that price, or may never see one at all. I don't know.
Yeah, I one of the things he asked in his question kind of alerted me a little bit. He said, should I try to find his cards in other set before they double? I don't think, there's this. If you're just starting in the 90s, do not let the fear guide your buying decisions. First of all, no player's cards are going to double in every set. That's just, I mean, there's just no way that's going to happen. And first, for multiple reasons. One is because not all sets are created or treated equal, and then number two, these guys aren't playing. They're not really doing anything to spike their value in drastic directions either way. But it's not a bad idea to go down and look at some of the sets that are cheaper or cards that are cheaper, because what you don't want to do is say that 99 rubies is kind of cool. It's sort of on my list. I don't really care much either way, but it's going up. I better get it now. Don't make that decision. I mean, like if you've got, what I would say is make a list if you're just starting out on a player of the best cards that you want of that player, put them in order, and then if you could say focus on maybe the top three. And if they're out of your price range, like you said, the funding is a great way to do it. Or the idea of buying some smaller cards in the interim, $100, $200, or whatever you can afford. And over time, as you build that up, you've got a lot of more equity in your collection so that you can maybe sell later, trade or whatnot, and maybe prices will come down a little bit. So just be mindful of the, I guess, the fear-based buying. There will always be cards of these guys, and we've talked about sales on the show of good players whose cards come up for auction and go for a high amount, and then the card, someone sees it and posts theirs, and then that next auction doesn't go for anything close to what the prior auction did.
So I'm looking at, as we're talking about this, I'm looking at Card Ladder, and on here in 2022, it's really interesting because it kind of relates, but it doesn't fully. There was some PSA 8 and PSA 7 and 9 sales of the same card, the 99 Skybox Shining Star Rubies Isaac Bruce, and the price range was anywhere from $158. This is all in 2022. $158 to $432, and there was 5 sales of that card. Now, technically, the price doubled in that time, like with random sales. One of them had to do with the fact that like a PSA 7 sold for $198, and then the PSA 9 sold for $432, right? But then right after that, a PSA 8 sold for $400. So that was in June of 2022, and then in October of 2022, a PSA 8 sold for almost the same price as a 9. So it was like there was the same type of fluctuation in terms of like doubling prices essentially as we're seeing like right now. It's just that the scale of the price or the amount is just higher, where I think maybe since 2022, 90s cards in general have just kind of we're in kind of like a little bit of a boost, just kind of a boom for those. You had now this again, it doesn't fully relate because this is the same grade, but still you go from like 448 to $1,000. It's kind of like a doubling in price, and it's just kind of all over the map. So it's like the same percentage increase essentially, just at like a different scale. So I just feel like, and I don't think it's just 90s either. It's just we went through the wide receiver market. Like you're seeing even ultra modern stuff, certain cards, like rare stuff and big cards of certain players, big sets. The prices are just kind of jumping when they sell. It's not every card, it's just certain rare cards. And it's not just 90s, it's early 2000s, it's ultra modern. So I think it might just be a testament of the card hobby right now in the landscape in general, where people are just kind of seeking out like the really iconic sets, the iconic players, and iconic cards of each era. And it's just at a different scale as it was in like 2000. If you remember in 2022, like what was, what was the big thing then? It was a lot of trying to get rich off of like PSA 10 base stuff still. I mean, it was a lot of just like your commodity cards, your base Lucas and that sort of thing, your base Tatums and basketball, my Ultramont basketball and all that stuff. But now it's like people are starting to they're growing. The hobby is growing, not in terms of like, well, size maybe, but like in terms of just mindset shift, where people are starting to learn a little bit more, I think. And they're just starting to focus on like key sets and key cards of certain players. So it could be attributed to that. I wouldn't necessarily just say it's like a pump or it's like somebody, some shenanigans going on all the time, though that does happen, obviously.
Yeah, just be mindful, be patient. Question things that you see. Don't necessarily be cynical, but I think it's a good practice to look a little bit deeper into some of these sales and talk to people who've been in it for a while. All right, it's time for our main segment with Matt. We're going to talk a little more about some forgotten stars of the 90s. This was a really fun conversation, so I hope you guys enjoy. All right, we are here with Matt at Rockwell Reserve on Instagram. Matt, thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me, man. Huge fan of the podcast. I've listened or watched all these episodes. It's been super cool to see what you and Brian have built here. So just a huge fan and really excited to be here, man.
Well, thank you so much for the kind words. I feel like I think I've probably followed you pretty close to the inception of your page. So I've kind of seen it come full circle over the last year. But back us up a little bit to like when you first started getting into collecting as a kid and kind of that path from, what you collected as a kid, when you stopped, how you got back into it, what you got back into, and then eventually the transition kind of into where you are now.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, my uncle has always been really into sports memorabilia, cards, all that, and so I just remember going to the shop with him. Like whenever my dad would dump us on him, we would like just hit the shop and he'd buy some packs or whatever it was. And so a product I remember back then was Metal Universe. I had a lot of that. I was kind of in that space where I was ripping a bunch of that. I have so many base cards as a kid. Nothing cool, but was ripping a lot of baseball, basketball, football, kind of the same stuff I'm into now for the most part, but a lot lower end sets, and didn't have even close to the knowledge of what I built today, and it was just buying kind of whatever I could and had binders full of base cards like most of us, I think. So that was kind of the beginning of it all. Like a lot of people, from what it sounds like, get to high school, drop it, don't think about it again. You do whatever you're doing in high school. So really didn't come across my radar again until it was probably the fall. Yeah, it was fall of 21. I had asked my parents, a handful of times, like, "Hey, do you still have my sports cards? Where do you think those are? Do we get rid of them?" And one day I was up in Fort Worth visiting my family, and my dad went to the storage, studio, whatever. Went and grabbed, came back and had a box, one of those plastic boxes full of sports cards. And my brother and I went through all of them, dug through, was so excited, thought I would find just, all these hidden gems. It took me, an hour or two to go through. By the end, had nothing at all, nothing of merit, just again, like all base cards, nothing. But it kind of gave me that itch. And so I got home and I started, watching YouTube and kind of seeing what was out there, and realized just like how much content existed about sports cards and how big it was. And I had no idea. And so for me, I kind of just like, it just like gave me that itch, like flip the switch. I don't know what you want to call it. I've always collected kind of random stuff, whether it was like DVDs or like clothes, even for a little while. Like I've always kind of collected. And so it just flipped the switch. And I really dove in and just started like, I mainly jumped into really ultra modern basketball. Surprisingly, it's crazy to think about now, but like that was kind of hot. That's what everybody was pushing. That's what they're pumping. Like that was what you saw. And so I was like, cool, this is great. So this will keep me in tune with the NBA. It's probably my least favorite sport of the big three, to be honest. But I like it. I've always liked basketball, and so got into that. Started doing breaks. Started doing all that stuff. And one day, kind of like looked at my collection and just realized like I don't like any of this stuff. I'm not proud of what I've built here. It's like you just get burned so many times, and finally you're just like, what am I doing? And so I kind of took a step back, and Zan, I had been following you for a while, back when you were more focused on the Patriots stuff. And I'd kind of seen you transition a little bit into starting to post some like Vladimir Guerrero's. And like, that was my guy. Like, he was one of my favorite players of all time, without a doubt. And so I started seeing you and some others post like 90s baseball cards. And it's kind of like, wow, that stuff's pretty cool. Like, I know nothing about this. Like, I don't like Topps baseball. I don't like the modern baseball stuff. But this ticks a nostalgia box. Like, these are cool cards, pretty interesting. And so I just kind of like knew nothing, started looking around, started watching stuff. And it was kind of all it from there. Like, picked up a couple cards on eBay. I've always been like into grading, so I love grading, even though I would be in breaks and get something packed fresh and send it off, and you get an 8, and you're just like, what am I doing here? And so I graded some of these Flair showcases that I picked up, platinum medallions, and they would get 8s or 9s, and I was like, oh wow, like these are still in really good shape, which really surprised me. And so I think just all those things, like it just made sense to me, just the nostalgia of it all, and just like I wasn't happy with what I had, and so I might as well collect stuff that I liked versus what everybody says you should like. And everybody says that, but like it's really true. And so for new collectors, like that's critically important.
Yeah, I think it's there's something of like a rite of passage of starting back into ultra modern. You got to toil in the mines of ultra modern for a while, and the breaks and all the CD breakers that are out there. Is there anything, uh, any like particular, I don't want to say like a bad beat, but like a particular event where it was like maybe a break that just really sucked, or like you bought a prospect and it went super down that kind of like said, make you say, that's it, I'm done with this?
Dude, too many to count. There's a couple that stand out. Like, I was buying guys. I remember like I think it was 22 basketballs, like 22 Prism. I started off, I wouldn't really buy Prism. It was too expensive. I wasn't really into it. And I was like, cool, when this drops, I'm going to buy some cards. And so I was buying like numbered, Prism color rookies. So I was buying like Peyton Watson and random guys like that. And then if you go back further, like Bones Highland in 21 and like guys like this who like kind of, Bones Highland, like flash, like there was some upside. And I was like, dude, I'm going to hit on this guy. This guy's the real deal. And just so many guys like that, too many to count. And I just kept getting burned over and over. And every break I wouldn't hit, or I'd hit what I didn't want, and it's just like over and over again, you kind of just take these little L's and they start to pile up. And then I think, really what did it was I mentioned this grading. I had a bunch of ultra modern basketball and such that I was sitting in for grading and just got killed with the PSA order. And it was just like 8, like got a 6 on one. And I'm just like, dude, I can't even like grade these brand new cards. I'm just like, I think all of that combined just really rubbed me the wrong way and made me question it all.
Yeah, like you said, you're kind of blowing all this money, and when you look at your collection, you're like, I don't really have much to show for it. Like now you look at what you spend on cards and you're like, okay, I have this, I can be proud of it. Versus back then, you're like, I have a Bones Highland base Prism PSA 9. That's the epicenter of my collection. But I feel you. It seems like the transition that a lot of us have made, and so you've kind of, as you've gone along, you've geared a lot of the focus of your collection now to these sort of let's say forgotten 90s stars. And so forgotten not in a bad sense. Obviously a lot of them were all stars, many of them were all stars, 100 RBI guys, 300 hitters, guys that were at that time considered really good players and are still considered really good players, but maybe not Hall of Famers. I'm thinking of guys like Garrett Anderson, Jason Giambi, Bernie Williams, Jim Edmonds, those kind of guys, all who were featured on your page. So what prompted you to go down that road instead of kind of the Griffey Bonds, Frank Thomas type of avenue?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a two-parter, like a combination of factors, right? Like one is the obvious one, like just the entry cost of those types of players. Like I love those players. Like Ken Griffey Jr. is my favorite player too. Like I love all those guys, would love to own those guys. But like, Griffey aside, like I hadn't built up the risk tolerance or, the just I couldn't fathom spending. And even back then, it wasn't quite as expensive as it is now, right? But like it was just too expensive and it was overwhelming. And it was just like, I can't in good faith do this, like know that I don't know anything about the 90s other than what I've learned in this short amount of time. And so, I started to poke around and would see guys like Gary Sheffield and Garrett Anderson and, Mike Cameron, even just guys who like, I remember, like I've got a deep knowledge pool of baseball and really all sports. Like I'm a sports nut, like I always have been. And I grew up in DFW, so I'm a Rangers Mavs fan, like kind of Cowboys. I'm not going to fully say I'm a Cowboys fan, but I've tried to jump on board here as I've gotten older, just so I can have a team to pull for. But like I've always been into the sport or the league more than a specific team. And so, that brought me just kind of, I guess, a different perspective on it all, where it was like, I don't have a favorite team. Like I don't have to collect just Rangers. Like they've got in the late 90s, like Juan Gonzalez, Pudge Rodriguez, like awesome guys who I do want to collect and have some cards of and would pick it up more. But I just never felt like constricted into do a certain player or a certain team. And so I wanted players who played in the 2000s, those are the guys that are most memorable to me, guys that played deep in the 2000s. And so guys like Mike Cameron and Garrett Anderson, like I remember vividly the 02 World, I think it was the 02, could be different, or maybe 01, or the Angels World Series against the Giants, right?
O2, yeah.
I remember Garrett Anderson that series, and there were just a lot of guys like that. And I started looking at it, and they weren't very expensive. And I just said, hey, let me just grab these guys who I liked. And like, yeah, people don't have them as much, and they're not as expensive, but like they meant a lot to me, and like it was cool, and it was just a good way to like get into this world of 90s, while also not putting yourself out there financially and risking a whole bunch and something you don't really know a ton about. And so it was just a combination of just, I think, large sports knowledge. Not that I'm like more or less than anybody else, but like love sports, like watch all those games back in the day. And so there's a lot of guys that mean something to me, and then just lower entry costs. It just made sense to kind of get started on that path, I think.
Yeah, and that's a great inspiration to newer collectors, because there are a ton of guys like that out there that don't command high prices, that are legitimate all-stars that you can get for a lot cheaper than guys now who aren't even all-stars, or maybe who are prospects. So I went back on your Instagram to what I thought was your 1-year anniversary, because if you go down all the way, September 2nd, 2023 is your first post that's visible, and it's a 2000 Upper Deck MVP, Garrett Anderson superscript PSA 9. And so I think I was like, oh, that's his first post. So tell me about like kind of, the stuff that you maybe removed. How far does it go back, and what did you remove? Why'd you remove it? And sort of segue that into like, what's the biggest inspiration on Instagram you've taken, and over the last year, like things that you've learned in the Instagram community?
Yeah. So again, a little misleading. I went recently and cleaned up my feed. It was mostly because of just like that OCD, if you want to call it that, or like the consistency of the feed. Like I have all black backgrounds with the PSA slab. And so I would go back, and I just had, when I first got into it, I was taking photos of it, my crappy phone, whatever, and they're fine. There were some cool cards in there. But I just would go through and look at it from time to time and just be like, I don't like how this looks. And so I cleaned it up for consistency's sake. That was kind of the main impetus. But that Garrett Anderson was one of the first 90s cards I bought. There was probably, I don't know, maybe the third or fifth or something like that, 90s cards that I bought. I think the first couple were probably some random like Flair Showcase Legacies, like 98s or 97s. I think I had a Brian Jordan at one point. I picked up, I don't know, Zan, if you remember this, I picked up that Brian Jordan that you were selling, the platinum medallion that I think you pulled as a kid too.
That's right.
that was on the front end too. So there were some like that, but that Garrett Anderson was one of the first ones. I remember getting that on auction, like kind of just stumbling into it. I think when I was first like looking at Garrett Anderson cards or whatever, and I was like, oh, it's on auction. It was like $20, and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like out of 25, like all right, like this is awesome. And so it kind of sent me down, the path I'm on today. Cards like that. I remember a Gary Sheffield Bowman Atomic that I actually just got rid of like a couple weeks ago for the first time. I had it. It was one of the first ones I had. I was so excited about it. It was just like Gary Sheffield is that guy that I think about, like playing with football in the backyard, and like I love Sheffield, and I've got some more cool Sheffields now. But anyways, guys like that. That was kind of the first '90s cards I bought, and everything before that was just like the ultra modern stuff that I had accrued and was kind of poke around on Instagram doing that. But I just really like the consistency of the feed, so cleaned it up. But to answer the other part of your question, things I've learned on Instagram, like it's an incredible community, particularly this '90s group. I mean, obviously, it doesn't speak for every single person, but it's just been a great group. And like, I'm not going to say that I'm a part of it, but I feel more a part of the hobby or more part of sports cards and this whole thing than I ever have, which is really cool. A lot of stuff I've learned, like new sets. I think at this point, like there's probably not any baseball sets that I really don't know about, and credit Baseball Cardpedia for that. Like incredible resource. I think most baseball collectors have used it, loved it, insane. But like when you compare it to what I found for other sports, football, basketball, like it is by far and away the best like resource or encyclopedia to learn about sets. But at the same time, earlier on, like I don't remember who it was, but somebody posted a Prime Choice Reserve, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I've never seen that before, never heard of this. Like that's a pretty cool card. I think in the caption they mentioned like it was affordable, it was cheap, and I was like, oh, perfect, that's right up my alley, right? And now I look at my collection, and I've got like I think 17 of those, like a ton of Prime Choice Reserve, so many that I haven't even shared yet that I just got back from PSA. So just the knowledge sharing on Instagram is incredible. Just learning about new sets, taking, one that's been popping up all the time people are talking about is 2010, 2011 Finest Mosaic, right? I know that's getting into the 2000s, not really what we're talking about, but like there's sets like that where I didn't know about until a few months back. And I'm like, oh, that's super cool. Like I want to try that out. So that's a cool piece. I think, on the flip side of it, one of the things you have to be really conscious of and cautious about is comparing your collection to other collectors. It's super hard. And, people have insane collections, right? Like you could I scroll through my feed and I'm just like, wow, like I'm never going to have some of these cards. And like, it can be a little demoralizing at times, but, I think in the end, one thing you have to think about is one, everybody's financial situations might be different. Two, a lot of collectors have had these cards for a really long time. And so, there's things like that you have to keep in perspective when thinking about your own collection. But it's important to like keep that in mind, because when I first got into the space and I just had my Flair Showcase Legacies and I'm looking at all these PMGs and stuff, it was like, man, it made me question a little bit of what I was doing. But I see it on the path, and really am proud of what I've built here in this last year. And I think the community and just like the knowledge sharing and seeing the different sets and parallels and stuff is really cool. And I credit so much of like my hobby enjoyment to Instagram itself. Like without me stumbling into that, I met a guy at a card shop in Austin when I first got into it, way back before I was doing '90s, and like he gave me his card, and he had his like little Instagram handle on there, and I was like, oh, people do this? Like, let me go follow him and see what's up. And then after a while, I made my own and then started following people. And Zane, I know you've said this a couple times now, but like going through people who you really like their collection and seeing who they're following and who's following them is insanely valuable. It really helps you kind of like own in your feed and like who you're being maybe influenced by or just what you're seeing, right? And so I think Instagram is just like an incredible resource for the card community for sure.
Yeah, that thing you said about the looking at others' collection rings true for any collector. It's funny though; it's kind of like the hot girl looking in the mirror and thinking she's ugly. Because I look at your page and it's like this is okay. First of all, everything is perfectly placed, centered, same background, slabbed. It's diverse. It's well curated. Yet you're sitting here and you're like, I have maybe a little collector insecurity. I feel like, yeah, well, everybody goes through that. And I think that part of it is like, what your page looks like now, what your collection looks like now. It's like, that's not the end game, in the sense that like, we're always we're always changing, we're consolidating, our preferences are shifting, and there's like that 30-40% of your PC that's kind of ever changing in order to strengthen, the other part of it. So I think that's a thing that rings true for everybody. And then the part about the community too, which is like when you're in the ultra modern, there's not really, it's kind of cold, it's kind of sterile, because it's first of all, a lot of like 20-year-olds, and a lot of them are just looking to make money. 20-year-olds and dealers, they're looking to make money, they're looking to get rich off of whatever prospect is hot. And so I don't think I was ever in any group chats during that period, maybe one, but it really was literally people just being like, how can I make the most money off of this card, which has a bit of an expiration date, I think, for guys like us who actually care about the cards and aren't just in it to, to make a buck off of someone. So, since you've been in it about a year for the 90s stuff, are there any, or have you set any kind of goals, maybe collecting goals that you're looking to accomplish, fulfill in the near future? And I don't put a timeline or time period on it. Are there any, like, maybe saving up for a particular card or certain sets that you wish you could get more into? Tell me a little bit about where you see yourself going here in the next few months, year, 2 years.
Definitely. Yeah. I think, as I mentioned with like the finest mosaic, like there's just certain cars I'm seeing where it's like, I want to get one of those. And so a lot come to mind. I actually just went through my first like really small round of like consolidation on some of this 90s stuff. Wasn't huge, but like it gave me some quick cash that was awesome, and allowed me to grab what I would consider maybe I don't know if grail is the right word, but like a card I did not think I'd be able to get. I don't have it with me yet. I thought it would be here today, but I grabbed my first 98 PMG, which I'm just like ecstatic about.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was one that I would say was a goal that I actually, assuming it gets delivered, you never know how it goes, but I just knocked off. So really excited about that. I expect a little bit more consolidation. I want to continue to grow and evolve, and I've got a large quantity of cards that I love, but at the same time, like I'm not going to have these forever, and so I'm going to be carefully considering, how to maybe free up some funds for some larger purchases. But as far as like concrete sets or parallels that I'm looking for, there's a few that I've never had. Some that come to mind, definitely like Flare Brilliance 24 karat. Everybody's talking about it. I've never owned one. There's no Garrett Anderson in the set, so it limits my easy access a bit. But there's some guys like Jim Edmonds and like a Mo Vaughn who I'd love to grab. So that'll be one of them. I'm not that I'm skeptical, but I wonder, like, will it live up to the hype? But everyone's just so high on it. I'm like, it's got to be just beautiful. So that's one that comes to mind. There's some others too. I'm trying to think what I have. I wrote a few of these down. Hang on.
98 Essential Credentials. I think you've looked at that one a little bit too, yeah.
So I just grabbed my first one as well. I just got it from PSA today. I don't want to bury the lead here because I think we might do the top 5. But I got my first one of those.
Oh,
so
wow.
that was the other one. That was the other one that I picked up recently. So it's been a really interesting time. Like I've made some moves. Some of this is old. Like I've had that 98 Credentials for probably 6 months. But I'm just so particular about my feed. Like I'm not going to post it until I actually get it graded. And it just kind of the time worked out stuff or whatever. So I just like had to wait and just sit on it. So I've got some cool stuff that's come back from PSA. Small order came back with one of those, and then Juan Gonzalez Star Rubies Spring Fling. So my first one of those.
Nice.
I've had Star Rubies, but I grabbed a Spring Fling of those that I just got as well. But others for sure, like 97 Star Rubies. Like I'm obsessed with thinking about that card, and every picture I see, like I have to get one of those cards. Basketball's out. I for a second thought about trying to jump in a Del Curry auction that happened recently just because I felt like that would be a cool one, but I didn't end up doing it. But I would love like a 97 football. I don't really know who I'm thinking about that would make sense for me or what I'm doing, but like that may be number one on the list. They're just so beautiful, and would love that. Fleer Showcase Legacy, I'm excited about. I've never, those don't come up very often. So I don't have any of those, the ones out of 2000. So that would be one of them. And then I mentioned the finest mosaic. So those are some sets that I'm definitely interested in. And then I think otherwise, like I would love to continue to build out what I've done with Prime Choice Reserve. mentioned I had, I think 17, 12 of which are graded. I think there's probably 3 I just got back that I haven't shared yet. But I'd love to build that out. I don't really identify with like full set collecting necessarily. But I kind of just like have a gut feel about which players I want to pick up. And so I have a list, and there's probably, I don't know, 30 more that I would love to grab one day. But that's more of probably like a long-term goal, is just continue to build that out. And then I'd like to do maybe some more football, I think in general, like expand a little bit into football. I think basketball's probably out for me. I've dabbled a little bit, but I think like outside of the odd Baron Davis that I might pick up, I don't see me doing a ton there. But I think football, I could expand my collection a little bit. And I've already done a little bit of that recently, but that's another opportunity to go to do as well.
You're very similar to me in the sense that we both like to have our page formatted our post formatted in the same way, and not share the card or show the card until it's graded. So I take it that you derive pleasure from the grading process itself. So when you're going out and you're looking for these 90s cards, are you pretty much tailoring your search exclusively to raw stuff, or are you looking for graded if you can get it, but just prefer the raw stuff?
Yeah, I do not tailor the search. I prefer raw. Would happily buy 8 already slab. Would maybe even prefer that, but just cost wise, just I feel like half the time it just doesn't make sense. Like I think that there's value adding grading for a lot of this stuff. Like you got to be particular. You need to make sure you're not buying one that's going to be a 4 or 5 or whatever, which I've done before. We've all done it. But at the same time, like I do love the process of grading. It is maddening. I do a lot of stuff in bulk because I'm not really doing a ton over that 500 threshold. Sometimes I am, and I do those, and they're fast, lightning fast, and they're great. But like some of those bulk orders will drive you freaking crazy. It is over 2 months, calendar days, and it's like takes forever, and you're just like it's been in assembly for 12, 14 days. Like what's going on? But I love grading, and so I typically lean towards raw. And I kind of mentioned that earlier when I first rated a couple of them, and I was just like shocked when they were getting 8s and 9s. And I've just done it more and more, and just continued to have like some pretty good success, knowing what to look for. I've graded a lot of cards. I've done a lot of PSA orders, and while I don't tailor it to that, like I do look for those and generally prefer doing that myself.
There's a different kind of satisfaction that comes out of the grading process, the organizing, the inputting, the mailing, the checking, the cataloging, all that stuff that you don't always get with the collecting aspect necessarily. So when you've been adding some of these, the 98 PMG yet to be unveiled, the 98 credentials, some of these other bigger cards. No, we'll be patient. So when you've been trying to get these, been acquiring these, how has the consolidation process been for you so far? What does that kind of look like? How have you walk us through that kind of like that analysis that you've had to make?
Yeah. So again, I'm just in like the infancy of kind of what I think I'll do big picture consolidation wise. I still had a lot of stuff that was probably if considered ultra modern. So like I haven't had to cut a whole lot of the 90s stuff yet. So I've been mainly like siphoning off the rest of what I have and getting the cash from all my ultra modern for the most part. I've probably got, I don't know, 10 slabs left that I'm trying to dump. But that was a lot of it. And like I said, I did my first round. I did a story sale for the first time. Something I've always wanted to try. I think it's super cool when done right. It can be also super annoying if you do it the wrong way. But was pleasantly surprised to just like the level of engagement and interaction and people grabbing some cards. Try to be thoughtful about pricing. And so would like to do some more of those thoughtfully done when the timing's right, quarterly or whatever it looks like. But yeah, I think I'm at the point now, like I'm still waiting for, I think it's 10 cards in one order, and then the PMG from eBay authentication. So I'm waiting for those to get in. And I feel like this week when they come in, I'm going to have everything in hand and really do that like deep sit down with the collection and kind of figure out like, okay, I got to axe like maybe 10, 12, 15 slabs, whatever it looks like. And just start to do that yet. So I'm really in the beginning stages of it, a little nervous. Nobody wants to do it. But I feel like, I mean this in a positive way, like y'all have done a great job in normalizing that part of the collector journey, right? Like there's this kind of idea that everybody talks about, like, I don't want to be a flipper. Like, what's a flipper? I think I have no issue that people would think I'm a flipper. But it's been cool to kind of just like think about like this is a normal part of the evolution in collecting, and knowing that like it's okay to have cards like this that you love in the 90s that other people want, and like hopefully you can find the right home for them with a collector on Instagram or whatever it is. But I expect there to be some more consolidation kind of as I grow and as I evolve. And I think I'm probably going to be there in the next month or two for sure.
I mean, 99% of the people that we follow on Instagram and that we interact with on Instagram don't have a limitless budget for cards,
Yeah.
And so if you aren't willing or you're scared to consolidate, your collection is never going to really change much because you're always going to have the same cards and you're just going to have to kind of wait to add something else. And I think there's as you mature in your collecting, there's an acknowledgement that it's okay that part of the collection is sort of the experimental component that you're using to solidify or improve the remainder of it. Because otherwise, like I said, it would just be static and kind of uninteresting. So I think that's an important thing for a lot of people to, in any really vintage, modern, ultra modern 90s, any space to consider, is that consolidation is a normal part. And it's really how you can get into bigger cards. Otherwise, you're just saving up, for indefinite periods of time and not being able to, afford the cards that you really want because you're being stubborn about moving on from stuff. So before you consolidate, before you get rid of some of these things, I wanted to get I don't think you'll get rid of any of these, but so take us through. I want to talk about your top 5 cards in your collection. All right. Well, we just stopped the recording a second ago, and no, it was not due to technical difficulties. Matt had a little interference with USPS, I believe, or maybe his FedEx, but someone was peering in through his window ominously, so we had to stop the recording. And we were about to do the 5 favorite cards of his. Funny enough, the 98 PMG he was just talking about just arrived, and now it's kicked Baron Davis out of the top 5 and wiggled its way into the top 5. So I'm not sure where it falls in there. So let's start with number 5 of your top 5 and tell us a little bit about why you picked that card, and maybe any significance that it may have to you.
So I am going to just quickly flash the Baron Davis. I think I like this card more than most people may, but this is sick. And it's a 10. So I love PSA. Who doesn't love a PSA 10? But Atomic Refractor out of 100, rookie, color match. I love Baron Davis. So that's a really freaking cool card to me. But nonetheless, it is out. Number 5, I would say, was going to be this Bernie Williams. This has been posted before, obviously, for a while. A lot of you know I love Prime Choice Reserve. I have a ton of these. Again, the grade factors in here, the rest of them, it won't quite matter as much. But I love Prime Choice Reserve, and Bernie Williams was iconic during that era. Such a cool player and seemingly chill dude. And the Prime Choice Reserve, I just think are a bit underrated. I don't want people competing with me on those for auction necessarily, but I think they're great cards, and the photography used in that UD choice set is really cool. So that's the number 5 is going to be this one. I had to throw a Prime Choice Reserve in there. Just kind of just that I love and I collect a ton of. So that's gonna be number 5. Number 4. Go ahead. I moved along.
Oh, sorry. Before you jump into that one, I was going to say you got to get. Do you have a 98 platinum medallion of Bernie Williams where he's playing the guitar?
I do not. It's hilarious though. It's a great card.
You got to get that one. Yeah, you got to get that one. He's got the bifocals with the fender on the knee.
Great one.
You got to grab one of those too.
Most, I can't think of. There's probably a couple other ones, but I can't think of any other cards in that set where the guy is not in a uniform and it's just a random abstract just a guy chilling photo. It has some crazy photography. I know there's one of Carl Everett. Yeah. Carl Everett, a dude with the peace sign bunny ears over his head, right? There's some weird ones, but that Bernie Williams is wild.
That's a great one. The only other one that comes to mind is there's some Chargers offensive lineman where he's on a golf cart or something like that. There's a few strange ones, but you got to get the Williams. So, all right, take us into what's number 4.
Yeah, so I buried the lead a little bit on this one, but number 4 is this Torrey Hunter, 99 star rubies, rookie out of 50. It's just a cool card. I think I saw someone posted one a long time ago when I first kind of got into this era of cards. It might have been Ryan Weber, honestly. I haven't talked to him or anything, but I just remember him posting this card, and he's got a lot of Minnesota stuff. And I was like, damn, that's a really cool card. Like, it's just him, great, like, photography pretty close up. Like, obviously, like, not an action shot, but like just a really, really cool card. And obviously, not, Star Rubies is insane. I saw this one and just like, I don't think I smashed bin, but I had a pretty high offer off of a counter probably. And I love this card. I got this raw. Remember getting it in and being like, this is in pretty bad condition. Like, this is not really what I expected here. Like, what did I get myself into? But of course, graded it anyways and ended up getting the 8. But this is a card I love. Like, the fact that it's a rookie is great. The rest of these are not rookies, but this is a super cool card to me. This is definitely, I think, in the top 5, number 4.
What you got for number 3?
Yeah, so number 3, 98 Circuit Thunder, Jason Giambi, Super Rave. This was another eBay purchase. I think this one was sitting up there for a while, and I had really liked Super Rave. I still do. I want more of these cards too. This would be maybe if I were to backtrack and answer that question about things I want in my collection, more Super Raves, like many of us do. This is just a super cool card. I like A's Giambi. When he gets over to the Yankee stuff, he's a little roided out, right? Just looking huge with like bird legs. He doesn't have the facial hair, the long hair, or anything. And so like A's Giambi is iconic. That was a really great run for him. Those teams were pretty fun with him and McGuire. And Canseco too, maybe. I don't know how that lined up, but regardless, super cool card. And I love like the Giambi long hair, and the Super Raves are great. Like, I get how they're a bit polarizing, just because like, yeah, it's just the lettering is, gold foil and it shines a little bit, but like something about these is like classic 90s, and it really checks the boxes for me. So that's probably going to be my number 3 is this Giambi.
I think when Canseco and McGuire left Oakland, they were like, we need this another beefy juice head to come in here and just mash bombers. So they got, I meant to ask you about the Hunter. I don't think you mentioned this. Have you seen the variation rubies at all of his? He's got the out of 15.
Yeah, I've seen it. I'm pretty positive when I bought that one, both of them came up by now our best offer. And I just wasn't at the point in my collecting journey to where I felt comfortable paying that kind of money for the out of 15. I think I'd love to have that one day, but at the time I was like, I can't swing that one, but I can justify this other one. And so didn't pull a trigger, but those are super cool and obviously do not pop up very often.
Yeah, that's a really nice one. And it's hard when you get rookies in that 99 set, because then you're kind of chasing too, especially when it's out of 15. But I love the Super Rave pick. Take us into number 2. Who do you have, and what do you love about it?
So pretty crazy timing that we're doing this tonight, because my number 2 and my number 1 now both got here today. One of them, number 2, that I'm about to show is back from PSA today, and so that's going to be this one. This is my first 98 Essential Credentials. This is Gary Sheffield out of 79, and this was a card I again saw really early on in my 90s collecting journey. Somebody posted on Instagram at some point, and a lot of them popped up over time. Like, this is not a card that doesn't pop up for whatever reason. There's been some copies that have popped up, but I kind of always said I got to have that card at some point. Like, I love Sheffield, as I mentioned earlier. That pink and purple, with the teal and the jersey, it's just very Miami to me. And Sheffield was just freaking iconic. That batting stance is unrivaled, unparalleled. So that was a card I kind of just always knew that I would hopefully end up with one day. Hopefully I'll grab the 98 Sheffield PMG one day too, because I love that one. That's insane. Like the Miami skyline, I think it is. But that's
that's a beautiful card there.
So cool. So that's my number 2. I was really excited.
The teal on that looks really good with the magenta color. And always there's something fun, about these 90s cards is that, since we're looking at them in retrospect, you can tell obviously when the photo's taken, and that photo is from the 97 season when they won the World Series. And so there's that extra added significance to it, being that it's the year after that. He's still in the Marlins uniform. And I think a lot of people probably equate him as a Marlin, maybe some as a Dodger, but that his best cards are in most of his best cards are in the Marlins uniform. So that's a really nice one. It fits with your theme really well. I think Sheffield may. I think he should make the Hall of Fame eventually. He's got 500 homers,
Me too.
but we'll see. All right, number one, the big reveal just came in after the mailman was running his late shift here. What do we got?
It's 8:40 p.m. Central Time, and this is the latest he's ever been. But it was raining. It was raining, so I'll cut him some slack. And he's a great mailman. So no disrespect, but yeah, the new number one. I barely even had a chance to look at it, but I kind of knew as soon as I got it, it would be number one. This is a card and a set. Well, I guess more so a set than the card specifically that I've just always wanted to have, and it's iconic for a number of reasons. It's just one of those that I think when I first started, I would have said this is never going to be attainable. There's no way I'll be able to get one of these. And so this one's going to be the 98 PMG. This is Ellis Burks. It's got the Rocky Mountains, I would assume, in the background here, out of 50, obviously. Just a super, super beautiful card. That scope effect is as crazy as advertised in person. And I just, the Rockies and the Angels are two teams that I look at in that kind of 90s era where I'm like, wow, there were a lot of great players who played in the 2000s who had historic seasons maybe. And the uniforms and the colors and the team are so cool. And so I felt like Ellis Burks really fit the theme of my collection in PC, and it was just a card that I just didn't know if I'd ever be able to get it again. So I grabbed this, and this probably instantly went to number one. So really excited about this first 98 PMG.
Yeah, huge congrats, man. That's like we were discussing a little bit off air. It's really becoming really hard to get even commons in that set. And I think people will just forget about how good Burks was for a long stretch. It made a couple all-star teams, hit 40 homers one year. I think he's an MVP candidate even one year.
Yeah.
And just really signifies Rockies 90s baseball, even though guys like Helton and Walker and Castilla may have Bichette may have more panache. He was a verified member of the Blake Street Bombers, and so that is an awesome one. It fits perfectly with the theme of your collecting. So everybody out there who's listening to this, if you don't follow Matt on Instagram, please do at Rockwell Reserve. Go check out his baseball, and hopefully he'll be adding some more football here in the near future. Matt, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ann. Had a blast. Really appreciate you thinking of me this episode. Absolute ball of time. Thank you.
All right, man. Take care. Love the energy. Love the discussion there with Matt. If you're not following him already, please go do so. Rockwell Reserve on Instagram. That was really fun. We'll have to have him back on down the line. Next week, we have another collector conversation, this time with my friend Aaron at Compton's Cards on Instagram. He's going to come on talk about his collecting of A-Rod, Andrew Jones, and some Auburn alumni. So stay tuned for that. If you have any listener questions, please be sure to send them, and we will catch you next week.